So you did a series on contentment, if I remember correctly, over the course of maybe, was it end of October and November and beginning of December?
Actually, from Thanksgiving weekend to the end of the
There
year.
it is. Okay.
Yep.
What were you thinking behind doing that series? What motivated you?
I had been doing obviously some reading, thinking about the subject for a while. Actually, there's some old Puritan books on it, a couple new books that have been.
What Puritan book did you read?
Jeremiah Burroughs.
Okay.
has and he's actually sort of the fount from which some of the others have done. And actually, it was something I've wanted to do for a long time. I mean, I actually, read stuff way back, but then just wasn't in the mix. But I suppose in terms of pastorally, some of what pushed me to think about it toward the end of the year was just, I guess there's a sense in which it just seems to me that we're becoming a culture of discontent people. I think the opening sermon in the series, I think we're a nation of abundance, full of dissatisfaction. That we really, it seems to be that our culture is becoming, somewhat self-cannibalizing with criticism and complaint. I mean, everybody is seeing what's wrong and criticizes this thing, and some of it was, so the anecdotal simple size is just watching how biting and caustic people can be about things that used to be considered recreational.
Okay, so this was the criticism against the Detroit Tigers pitchers.
Well, one of but like Josh Ham, I mean, just you're like, seriously, an entire stadium is going to rip on a person because they didn't do something that nobody in those stands could do. And just I guess the deeper issue is how much satisfaction in life people are attaching to things that are unimportant at the end of the day. I mean, your football team wins or loses, you're going to be depressed, or that's what you live for. I mean, you live for, a bunch of people winning a game. That part of our culture which means to me that people are not satisfied with where their lives are. They're chasing after other things to sort of give them, a jump. I mean, they're living for recreation, they're living for an escape because they're not happy where they are. That part of it. Then just the fact that it seems like as a pastor, more and more problems are showing up in the lives of people that I would think would be rooted back to some degree to contentment issues. I mean, a couple times in the series, I really went after challenging people about debt, for instance, which I would take as being people not content with what they have, so they're going to go get something else before they actually can really afford it. And we've got an entire culture like that. I mean, you look at all the way from the top down, we're people who are chasing after stuff that we really can't afford, and that's because we're not satisfied. And then I preached it from Thanksgiving to Christmas because that's the season in which everybody's, avalanched with things aimed at trying to make you unsatisfied with what you have. I mean, you've got to have a better this and a better that, and boy, your kids will be unhappy if you don't, overspend to get them all kinds of gifts, and just such a commercialization of a season that is actually anything but that. I mean, Christ coming into the world, is an act of humility and sacrifice and service, and it's become in our culture a season of gluttony and consumption and gratuitous pursuit of passing pleasures in a way that I felt like it would be good to to try and center in on some of that and focus on it. So I mean, actually, it was really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't often hear, and I'm not actually inviting them, but we don't hear a lot of negative feedback about preaching. But I would say hitting that stuff, I had more than usual positive about, boy, you reminded me of something that I really needed to be thinking about. So thankful for that. And, I mean, obviously the last week was on, being content in physical suffering. And the morning I preached it, that afternoon I find out one man in our church has got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I saw the email, and I actually could remember while I was preaching, looking out at that guy and thinking, now I'm thinking after I preached it, here was God, giving a word for somebody who's just getting diagnosed with cancer. And I talked to another, man in our church who's got a family member that's going through just a nagging, continuing issue that they're trying to go. And we were actually, during prayer week, we were praying about the issue. But before we did, he said, so, that message at the end of the year was really, really good for us. Because I think, I think in a very real way, like I said in the series, I think it's a mark of genuine godliness that we can be content. So, it was good. It was good for me. I mean, I hopefully always I'm, feeding on the things that I'm going to be preaching. So it was very good for me to have to wrestle through it. The sort of core concept was that contentment is satisfaction with and submission to God and His rule over our lives. So it's that dual satisfaction with that. As I can be, this is sort of a soft word for it, but I can be happy with God. I'm satisfied with God. I don't need anything else. That's where we start in Hebrews 13. You have God, so you don't need any other helpers. You can be content. And then submission to Him because He's in control, and then work it out from there. But I tell you, this time, I mean, I've looked at that 1 Timothy 6 passage tons of times over the course of my personal life and then as a pastor. But it really was challenging to see how Paul stresses the importance of genuine contentment by contrasting it with false godliness. So real contentment, or real godliness, I should say, is content in this world with what God's provided. You're not using godliness to get more in this world, but then that contentment really is a means of great gain in terms of eternity. And then he turns the corner, how important contentment is to keep us guarded against temptations and harmful desires. And really, and I guess that's part of it is, when you're counseling people during the week who are feeling the impact of yielding to those temptations and harmful desires, and then you're hearing God say, so this is where part of the protection is. You need to learn to be satisfied with me and submitted to me rather than thinking you need, which people probably got tired of hearing me say it, but you need something more or something else, because that's what I kept trying to use, that sort of that phrase to get people to be thinking, do you need something more than Christ? Are you looking for something else than Christ to bring satisfaction? And it was really good. Then the other side of it was how Paul says in Philippians 2, how important it is to our testimony of the gospel that we're content. That if we're as Christians living as grumbling and complaining about stuff, we're no different than the sinful and perverse generation in which we live. So our satisfaction with God and submission to Him is sort of the backdrop for good, clear gospel witness. And I thought that was just a reminder to me to recognize that. I mean, practically, honestly, that's part of it, I think, is in myself was, how am I communicating my own contentment if I'm a complainer about stuff. You know, and I wouldn't say that I don't think I'm like a negative Nelly kind of a person, but I specifically started thinking about times in which, you know, I could get a real edge about how things are going, say, in one of my son's athletic competitions. You know, and all of a sudden I get all bent out of shape, and what am I doing to practically undercut my own expression of confidence that God's in control? He's not in control of that. So everything over here I can say He's in control. If I come over here, no, I gotta work it out. And so it just was good to start to think through, even for myself, some of the ways in which I might not be being satisfied with God and His plan, so that I'm recalibrating and then, you know, working out. And I thought Paul, you know, I'm not trying to repreach the whole series, but, you know, those two passages we looked at in 2 Corinthians where Paul talked about the key. I think the key to contentment is to view our resources as a stewardship to do His will. So God has given us what we need for ourselves and do His will. And so we have to believe that and live like that. If we don't think we have what we need to do His will, then obviously we're not satisfied with His provision and not submitted to the timing of His doing it. And then the one with Paul, which has always been a challenge to me, that thorn in the flesh, is that, you know, would I be willing to say the power and purposes of Christ are more important than my comfort? And that's really what Paul is saying. He's learned to be content, you know, with all these negative things, so that the power of Christ can dwell upon him. And so the key to cultivating contentment in the midst of our circumstances is to see that they're designed by God for His glory and our good. So I'm going to trust Him and say, Lord, if this is what you want in order to magnify the purpose and power of Christ, then I'm ready to be content with that. And I don't think that's a one-time decision. I think it's probably like a every day, many times a day. Lord, I know you're in control. You've designed this, so help me to value the purpose and power of Christ as more significant, to weigh the scale down more than my own comfort. Because when I become a griper, complainer, unhappy in my heart and soul, it's because I value my comfort over the purpose of Christ in it. So I think there's a lot there that in our day that we could do as believers to adorn, I'll use Titus's word, to adorn the testimony of God's word, if we really showed that we're satisfied with God and submitted to Him. But if we're chasing after everything else that everybody else is,
and complaining when we don't get it,
right, or thinking, well, follow Jesus so you can get all this stuff, and then it doesn't come, then you have shipwrecks, or you have a horrible inconsistency, you know, that God isn't worth it. We go for God for what He'll give us, and if He doesn't give it to us, then we complain about it. And you know, I just think that seems to me that in many ways the Church of Jesus Christ in our day is struggling with that. Even, I mean, just to bring in the contemporary thing, this whole Obama inauguration thing. You know, I think it was Ray Ortolan that...
You're talking about the Giglio? Yeah, okay.
So he gets pulled out, and I mean, there's this avalanche of really, in a sense, complaint about discrimination against Christians. And I wish I could think the exact words of it, but Ray Ortolan said something to the effect of, you know, really suffering for Christ would simply mean we're pressing on purposefully rather than spending all of our time complaining about it. And I thought he was right, because it's like all of a sudden we're some, oppressed people, and we're being marginalized, and now I'm not saying everybody was sinning when they were doing it, but it just, to me, that seems like the tendency of our day is just immediately to complain instead of press on, joyfully to do what Christ has called us to do. And I'm not certain it enhanced our witness with the lost world to couch everything like as, why are you picking on us Christians? It just dropped into the same game that they're in. It's all about groups, and so I just think contentment probably is a much deeper core issue than sometimes we come to grips with, even the very face of our Christian life, our churches. If we're supposed to be full of joy in Christ, it's hard to be that if we're not happy about life. I mean, if we're discontent. So I think it's a more fundamental, probably, virtue than we sometimes give it attention.